Welcome back to Sustainability at Work. Today's episode is a journey through the world of spirits, sustainability, and mental wellness with a remarkable individual who wears many hats, quite literally. Our guest today is not just a tree hugger, but a true lover and protector of bees. He is an awarded bartender, conquered many marathons, and emerged as a champion for mental health. Today we dive into the incredible story of Tim Etherington-Judge, the co-founder of Avallen Spirits and the founder of Healthy Hospo. With Tim, we will explore the world of sustainability in the spirits sector. Tim embarked on a mission to create the most sustainable spirit in the world, and we will unveil the importance of raw materials and the many choices brands need to make in the supply chain. But that's not the only dimension of sustainability we are exploring today. Tim, through his work with Healthy Hospo, is advocating for mental health in the hospitality sector, a crucial aspect of social sustainability. Get ready for insight, awareness, and a dash of inspiration. So whether you are a tree hugger, a cocktail enthusiast, a hospitality warrior, or simply curious about sustainability in business, this episode is crafted just for you. Buckle up and join us on this spirited adventure. Sustainability at Work is a podcast about sustainability in the workplace and in companies. My name is Samara and I've been working with sustainability for almost 10 years. So welcome everybody. Welcome Tim to Sustainability at Work. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you very much. It's a real honor to be invited onto the podcast.
Thank you. So I'm very excited because this is going to be our first episode talking about hospitality and talking about spirits and sustainability in this industry. So thank you for being here with a lot of things happening on your side for this. So before we dive into the two organizations that you founded, I have a feeling that there is a big, huge personal story behind them. So I just wanted to ask you, because you are kind of an eco-warrior, you are a bit of a tree hugger,
Yes.
a bee lover and protector, you are also a bartender, you are a crazy marathon runner, and also you are a mental health champion. So what is the story behind this?
I guess it all started with where I grew up. So I'm very lucky to come from a really beautiful part of the world called Cornwall in England. It's the bit of Cornwall that they'll say the bit of England that no one thinks exists because it's surrounded by beautiful beaches, turquoise ocean. We have palm trees, good surf. So sometimes it's called the California of England. But growing up there, it's a very rural area, so you just have tourism. So in the summer, it's really easy to get a job, and most people fall into hospitality as their first job, which is what happened to me. But also because it's such a naturally beautiful area, it's very easy to grow up kind of with a real passion for nature and the environment. You know, when you spend all of your days as a child, either on the beach, in the ocean, kind of running around forests. That was where the kind of my passion for sustainability and hospitality really started. And so I guess the kind of the next important point in my journey was 2005, which is my mother suddenly passed away just before Christmas. And it was I was very close to my mum, and growing up, my father was away a lot of the time in the army. So kind of formed a very close bond with my mother. And when she passed away, I always said that it's her final gift to me was the freedom to go traveling and to go and explore the world. So before my mother passed away, I'd only really been to Australia, and I'd been to France on a school and Germany on school trips, but never really kind of spread my wings to see what the world was all about. So after my mother passed away, packed my bags and moved to New Zealand. Another country where it's very easy to fall in love with nature and the environment. And for me, New Zealand is the most beautiful country in the world. From a kind of a natural beauty perspective, it's I don't think there's any other country that packs so much natural beauty into such a small space. It's just an incredible place. And there, kind of my hospitality journey continued. Got really serious about bartending. 2009 Bartender of the Year in New Zealand. Then got a job offer in India. So went from kind of one of the greenest, cleanest countries in the world to the chaos of Mumbai. But went to Mumbai to go and reopen the bars at the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel in Mumbai, which was the hotel where the terror attacks of 2008 happened. So reopened the Harbour Bar there, which is India's oldest bar, and then spent 3 years living in India, traveling around the country, really falling in love with the people, the food, the place itself. And during that time, I joined Diageo, who are, if your listeners don't know, the world's biggest spirits producer. So they are the owners of brands like Johnny Walker, Guinness, Baileys, Smirnoff, Tanqueray, and did 6 years with them, initially in India, but progressed up to the role of a global ambassador. So my job was to travel the world, teaching people about the brands, kind of being an advocate and champion for the brands all over the world. And to a lot of people, it sounds like a great job. You know, you get paid to travel, to drink, to hang out in great bars and restaurants. But when you travel for 250 days of the year and you're drinking for most of those, and you're always away from your friends, you're always kind of permanently jet lagged, eating kind of restaurant food or room service, after some time, if you're not careful, it takes a toll. And in 2016, after my most intensive year of travel and some internal restructuring within the company, things just started to fall apart very quickly. And it was November the 8th in a hotel room in Athens, whilst on a work trip, that I decided to try and take my own life in the hotel room, with a bottle of bourbon and some prescription strength painkillers. I have no idea if what I was doing, obviously it didn't work, otherwise we wouldn't be here today. But the intention was there to kind of end everything. My life, I just saw no hope and no way out of the situation that I was in, and I just wanted it all to be over. But coming through that period, I started to talk very publicly about my struggles through social media. So published a big post around kind of what had happened to me and the reasoning why it had happened, expecting lots of messages of love and support from people, which would help me kind of get through this really difficult period. And I got all of those messages, and they really did help. And I thank everyone that sent me a message during that time. But what really changed everything for me was all the messages I got from people privately telling me their stories of struggle within the industry. Some of them were friends, some of them were complete strangers, some of them were peers in the industry that I really looked up to. And I realized during that phase that there was no one talking about health and well-being within the hospitality and drinks industry. I thought I was all alone, but then I was receiving hundreds and hundreds of messages from people privately telling me that they'd been through something similar. So it just left me with this feeling of like, if I know there's so many people going through what I've been going through, I've got to try and do something to change it. We can't just carry on in this situation. So even though doctors, and other friends and family were telling me to, you can't be in this industry anymore. It's bad for your health. It's toxic and not good for you. I just had this burning feeling of like, I've got to help. I've got to do something to try and improve this industry that's given me so much, right? It took me to 70 countries around the world and gave me so many experiences. I've got to try and change this conversation around health and well-being within our industry. So that was the birth, the genesis of one of my companies, Healthy Hospo, which is a health and well-being training provider for the hospitality industry around the world. So that was the first kind of business I started after my breakdown. And then my now business partner in Avallen, she also left Diageo around the same time. So we become great friends, whilst she was also an ambassador, a global ambassador for another brand. And we kind of sat down and she had left, so she was looking for something to do. I was like, well, I've got Healthy Hospo, but I'd really love to have a brand. And I had this kind of itch that I really needed to scratch around sustainability. I've been passionately campaigning for environmental issues since I was a teenager. Long before the days of Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil, I was part of an activist team for Greenpeace, and specifically on a campaign called Stop Esso. So we would go out and we would do kind of peaceful activations to, maybe this is something that Extinction Rebellion could pick up, because it was a lot of fun at the time and very effective. But we would go and we would take action against petrol stations and shut them down for a period of time so nobody could buy fuel, and just make it really difficult for the petrol station to kind of get up and running again. And then I got involved in lots of campaigning for Greenpeace, lots of tree planting, all sorts of whatever I could do to kind of increase the conversation around climate change and environmental destruction.
Mm-hmm.
But then kind of joining the corporate world really felt like I needed to have a business that took positive action as well.
Okay.
And as my experience was within the world of drinks, being at Diageo for just over 6 years, and learning how drinks brands really build and grow and sell, and seeing that within our industry there's a lack of true understanding, I would say, of sustainability. If you look at every single alcohol product that we drink, with the exception of one that I know of, starts its life as an agricultural product. Everything starts its life in the soil. Yet so few brands in our industry talk about the environmental impact of their raw materials.
Yeah,
there's a lot of focus.
That was my question. What makes a spirit sustainable?
Yeah, so in our industry, a lot of people who talk about sustainability will talk about packaging, and they'll talk about the bottle, and they'll talk about secondary packaging, which is like the box it comes in, and they'll talk about the labels and the corks, and all of this stuff. But very few brands, and thankfully there's an increasing number of brands, are talking about the agricultural, the raw ingredients their alcohol is made from. So it, like lots of things, it started with a missed flight. So I was in Amsterdam for a project with Healthy Hospo, and I missed my flight home. So I called up Steph, my business partner, and said, "Hey, I've missed my flight. Can I stay at yours tonight?" She's like, "Yeah, sure, come over." So went over. We had a couple of bottles of wine sitting around her dining room table, and we're like, "Why don't we do a drinks brand together?" She was working on something else at the moment, or that time, and I was like, it's a nice idea, but it's going to be really difficult. And I think I've got a better idea. It's like, why don't we try and create the world's most sustainable spirits brand? Because spirits is where our experience is. We know that how to grow a spirits brand. We know how to build one because we worked at Diageo. And I think there's a big gap within the industry of something that's truly sustainable. So we sat down and we kind of started to look at what does that look like? And today it looks like Avallen. It looks like the product that we launched in 2019.
So it is Calvados that comes from apples from France?
Yes, exactly. So Calvados it's like a champagne or a cognac or a tequila. It's geographically protected. So all Calvados must come from a specific region within Normandy in France. Okay. You can't produce it anywhere. If you make it anywhere else in the world, it's called apple brandy.
Okay.
But to be Calvados, it must be made in Normandy in France.
So why apples?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when we sat down, we wrote on a piece of paper, the world's most sustainable spirits brand. And we started from a blank sheet of paper. We had no aspirations to create a category. Like we had no aspirations to make a gin. Actually, we said no gin because there's enough gin in the world. We don't need any more brands of gin. But we had no aspiration over whether to make a whiskey, a rum, a vodka. We just said it's whatever we do, it's got to be the most sustainable from start to finish. And we said, well, if everything starts as an agricultural product, that's where we have to start our research into what we're going to do. So we took 4 metrics of carbon emissions, biodiversity, water use, and pesticide and fertilizers. And then we tried to analyze the main ingredients that are used to make alcohol, which are cereal grains. So most vodkas, most gins, all whiskey, all things like baijiao, soju are made from cereal grains. You've got sugarcane, which all rum, cachaça is made from. Also, lots of spirits in India are made from molasses. You've got agave, which is tequila and mezcal. You've got grapes, which is brandy, but also wine. And then we also looked at apples. And then we analyzed them across those 4 metrics that I mentioned. And apples came out on top in every single category. So then we just kind of looked at each other and went, well, we've got to do something with apples then. And knowing the industry, we know that Calvados is the most kind of well-regarded and highest quality apple brandy category. So we said, right, we're going to have to make a Calvados. Stephanie also grew up in France, so her parents live in the south of France, in Beaujolais. Her father's a winemaker, so Steph was very happy. Oh, we're going to do a French product. And then the more that we looked at Calvados, the more we realized it was the right decision because it is geographically protected. It also comes with a lot of rules and regulations around its production. And a lot of those regulations protect the orchards and protect the traditional nature of the orchards. And because not all apple orchards are the same, if you go to, say, China or the US and you see the commercial apple orchards, they'll be enormous, huge areas, all growing the same species of apple, probably pollinated by honeybees. Whereas the orchards in Normandy are hundreds of years old. They're very traditional. You have multiple species of tree in a single orchard. There are strict rules and regulations around when you can cut the grass, the meadow in between the trees. They have hedgerows around the outside of them, which are great sources of biodiversity. Irrigation is banned, so there's a very minimal water footprint in production, and then very tightly regulated when it comes to pesticides and fertilizers. In some cases, more so than organic standards.
Wow, I didn't know that. Very interesting. But at that moment when you started, what was your knowledge about sustainability? How did you grow that kind of knowledge? Did you ask for help outside?
A lot of it came down to just do personal education. I have a very curious mind, so I'm constantly reading, trying to find information. So I'd spent kind of since my formative early teenage years reading about climate change, environmental destruction, hanging out with people who had similar interests, so talking about it a lot, and just doing all of my own research. And then a lot of it, kind of especially when we started to do the research on Avallen, none of it is rocket science or groundbreaking. We looked at things from a very simple perspective. And so, for example, if we take carbon emissions of agricultural material, there's lots of information out there. There's lots of papers that you can read that are published and peer reviewed that look at the carbon life cycle of various farming systems. A lot of it is already well documented and well understood. Because we are harvesting the apple, not the tree. The tree is sequestering carbon dioxide, and those trees will grow. You'll produce fruit for 60, 70, 80 years. Whereas if you've got a cereal grain, every year you're harvesting the entire plant. So any CO2 that is sequestered is released back into the atmosphere after harvesting. A sugarcane will be harvested somewhere between 1 to 4 years. Agave plants used to be 12 years to mature. Now, because of the growth of tequila and mezcal, now they're down to kind of somewhere between 4 to 6 years for lots of tequilas. So there's lots of like simple things like that. Just doing our research online, reading papers, asking questions.
Mm-hmm. And then following the supply chain, what are the other steps that you took on the packaging, for example, which was?
Yeah. So then on this, one of the first things that we did is we said that any decision we take with the company, we must always put the lens of sustainability over that decision. And we must always do the most sustainable decision within our budgets, because we founded Avallen on our own personal money. We don't have, and we still don't have like wealthy investors. We started it on 40,000 euros, which was the money we got from leaving Diageo. So when it came to packaging, we did the research into glass. We found out that glass is an incredibly carbon intensive material, and it's roughly kind of a kilo of CO2 emitted to 1 kilo of glass weight. So it's like a 1-to-1 ratio. So we knew that if we got a light bottle with a high percentage of recycled glass, that's going to have a lower carbon footprint. So we deliberately went out to try and find the lightest bottle that we could find that was produced in the local area, with a high percentage of recycled material. We found a paper supplier that makes the paper for our labels out of recycled paper and waste apple pulp. So that also tells a nice story because it links back to the apples, which people like. So, for every like tiny little decision, so we try to make sure that we were choosing the most sustainable option. So, for example, the box that our bottles ship in is unbleached and uses a monochrome ink. So it's only one color of ink, because that has a lower footprint or lower impact than using a bleached box with colored ink, because the most sustainable thing to do is to do nothing. So the more processes you can remove,
Yeah.
the more sustainable you are.
Okay. So tell me about the bees, because I forgot about the bees when we were talking about the field.
The bees are super important. So obviously our apple trees are reliant upon bees for the pollination. So if there's no bees, there's no apples, there's no apples, there's no Avallen. There's obviously the wider impact upon our food supply, not just for humans, but for animals around the world. The bee in its 20,000 different varieties has been declared the most important species on the planet, because they literally do kind of pollinate most of the food that all animals on Earth, or most animals on Earth, eat. So when we were, building the brand, we were like, right, we've got to have a charitable, we've got to support a charity somewhere along the line. We've got to use our profits to help a charity of some kind. And it was going to be an environmental charity. And then we were like, well, the bees are really important to our production, and the story around bees that the media portray has been manipulated, and isn't the kind of the true story that we need. So when you talk to people about bees and you mention bees, they will almost always think of two things. One will be honey, and the second will be being stung. Yet almost all bees don't produce any honey, and a vast number of bees don't even have stingers. Because the narrative around bees has always been around the honeybee, and the honeybees are not in trouble, right? There are more honeybees today than there was 10 years ago or 20 years ago, because they are a commercial product. They are very, very valuable to our global food system and our economy, because they hive in such vast numbers. They can be used to pollinate crops. You'll see it in the US. They truck the bees around the country. 1 week they're in California pollinating almonds, and then they're driven to Florida for blueberries. And and they produce honey. And honey is one of the most valuable substances humans have ever discovered. Yet the bees that are really in trouble, and if you look at the numbers, it's anywhere between 60 to 85% decline in bee populations in the last 30 years, which is like less than my life on Earth. It's absolutely frightening. The bees that are really in trouble are the wild bees, the bees that don't produce honey, the bees that don't hive in numbers, so they're not commercially useful. And those are the bees that we wanted to help, because those are also the bees that pollinate our orchards out in Normandy. We don't use honeybee hives. So we do a lot of work. We donate 2% of our revenue to the Bumblebee Conservation Trust in the UK to help their work with protecting and restoring bumblebee populations. Because let's face it, the bumblebee is everybody's favorite bee. It's the big, furry, cute one that everybody loves, right? So we do that, and then we also try and educate people on the importance of wild bees. So whenever anyone asks us about bees or we do a training session, we always make sure that we talk about all of the other wonderful bees that we've got out there, like the bumblebees, the mason bees, the leafcutter bees, the cuckoo bees, the miner bees, the scissor bees. There's one in Indonesia that I particularly love called Wallace's giant bee, which is like the size of my thumb. It's the world's biggest bee. It's like 2 inches long. So it's, the bees are so important, and it's so much more than just the honeybee. If the honeybee survived, we lost all the others, we would lose a huge amount of our food. Like a honeybee, for example, can't pollinate a tomato, because a tomato, along with blueberries as well, for example, rely on what they call buzz pollination. And I love talking about this because when I found out, it just blew my mind about how amazing nature is. So the flower of the tomato plant will only release its pollen at a certain vibration, and that vibration is 400 hertz. So no matter how hard a honeybee tries, it can't pollinate a tomato. But when a bumblebee comes along, a bumblebee can land on the tomato, can unhook its wings, and then vibrate its body at exactly 400 hertz, which allows the tomato plant to release its pollen, and then the bumblebee can do its thing.
Crazy! I didn't know that. It's incredible.
It's this amazing symbiotic relationship that nature has developed, and that's why it's so important that we protect all of the bees, not just the honeybee.
Yeah, the biodiversity there is super important, because you take out one, it seems like it's just one, but it's just a puzzle of things that comes out.
Exactly. You see it all the time in nature when we take out one species, that there's this kind of cascade of impact throughout the entire ecosystem.
Yeah. So just one quick question. I don't want to expand too much, because I guess it could be the for another episode. But what is the state now of the spirit industry in general? What are the changes that you have seen? Hopefully positive. Hopefully.
In terms of sustainability?
Yeah.
It's definitely moving in the right direction. Avallen launched in 2019. And when we launched, there was some commitment towards sustainability, but it was more of a thing that was done because it was a good thing to do. Now it's becoming much more a positive marketing activity. So you're seeing every brand now has to talk about sustainability in some form, even if it's not, and even if, unlike Avallen, it's not core to your business and your mission, you have to talk about it. So that's good, and we're starting to see more and more brands look at things like regenerative agriculture. We're starting to see some great innovations in packaging. So, from paper bottles, we've got Avallen's available in the first commercially available paper bottle, through to circular systems, so platforms like Spirits, which is not kind of 5 years ago, which is a reusable 4.5 liter low carbon, low waste technology solution, so which Avallen has partnered with. So we're starting to see things moving in the right direction. The two biggest areas that the industry really has to tackle and face is the agricultural impact, because almost all alcohol that we drink is made from industrial monocrops. And these monocrops are terribly destructive for our environment, whether it's biodiversity loss, excessive carbon emissions, huge water footprints due to irrigation, and then the dead soil, which means that plants become reliant upon artificial chemical-based pesticides and fertilizers. And then also the packaging. The drinks industry uses billions of single-use glass bottles every year. And your average spirits bottle will weigh about 600 grams. So for every bottle, that's 600 grams of CO2e being used to produce it, which is a large footprint for something that you're just going to throw away. And even if you do recycle them, and we get this all the time, it's like, yeah, but glass is recyclable and you can recycle it infinitely. To recycle glass uses a large amount of energy. And it's very difficult to get 100% recycled glass. So normally what you'll find is somewhere between 40 to 65% of recycled glass in any bottle, because you need it to be of a quality that you can see the liquid through the inside. And you'll use anywhere between 60 to 80% of the energy of making virgin glass to recycle it. So that is also another issue the industry needs to tackle. So we're starting to see some innovations in packaging, whether it's recycled aluminium bottles, paper bottles. Also starting to see some smaller brands look at reuse systems. So how can you get the bottle back to refill it after it's been used, rather than just chuck it in your recycling, where it gets smashed into tiny little pieces, melted down and turned into something else, which seems like a wasteful situation. And there are deposit return schemes being trialed around the world, some more successfully than others, where you take your bottle back to a centralized location, where rather than it getting smashed into pieces, it can get collected, cleaned, and reused. So, a lot of the systems is like going back to the old way of doing things.
I was going to say the milk.
Yeah, exactly. I'm old enough to remember having the milk delivered on our doorstep. So, there's lots of things that need to happen, and sometimes it's just going back to the original solutions. Because I don't think that the global economy or business leaders or politicians are brave enough to put the cost of environmental destruction and of waste back onto the balance sheets of businesses. Because essentially this is where a huge part of this problem has been created. As a business owner myself, because there's no cost for me when it comes to dealing with the waste of the bottles that we produce. We push that cost down onto the taxpayer. Right? So we go, it's not our responsibility. It's the responsibility of the homeowner or the business. And then recycling centers are a public service. They're paid for through my council tax, or my city tax. And the business doesn't pay any cost. So if we could put those costs back onto the business, and say, you know what, you produced that bottle, you sold that bottle, so therefore it's your cost to deal with that bottle. We would find very quickly that businesses would innovate solutions to reduce those costs. But because those costs are not on their balance sheets, there's very little incentive for them to change.
Yeah, agree. That's for most industry. So I'm gonna change a little bit topic, but not so much, because I believe sustainability is also mental health, and that's a huge part of the social sustainability. So Can you talk me a little bit into Healthy Hospo and how it was? Well, how it was started. You already talked about that, but
Yeah.
what do you do?
So Healthy Hospo is trying to both change the conversation around health and well-being for people that work in hospitality and drinks, and then also provide education on how to do that. So the hospitality industry, and within the hospitality, I do bring the drinks industry into it, because it's very difficult to separate the two, because one supplies products to the other, and when you work for a drinks brand, you spend a lot of time in hospitality. So it's to try to kind of change the conversation and change the narrative. We have a very toxic culture within hospitality a lot of the time. Whether it's the bullying culture that happens, particularly in professional kitchens, that is celebrated by the media, through the championing of chefs like Gordon Ramsay and his behaviors. Chefs growing up think that it's perfectly acceptable. Not only is it perfectly acceptable, but that's the way that you become a successful chef, is by screaming and shouting and bullying people within a kitchen. And it's been celebrated by the media, through to rampant drug and alcohol abuse within hospitality establishments, where you've got the highest rates of drug abuse of any industry in the world. Bartenders are more likely to die of alcohol and related disease than any other type of worker. And excessive burnout. The hospitality is the lowest paid industry in the world in total. It's extremely high stress, extremely long hours, out a lot of time working outside of your circadian rhythm. Whereas for us that work a 9 to 5, you're working with inside your circadian rhythm. So when the sun is up, you're awake, and when the sun goes down, you're asleep. Whereas when you work in hospitality, that's kind of flipped on its head. So you suffer more with kind of sleep problems. You have the irony that those that work in food and drink quite often eat the worst diets, because they're either always too busy to eat healthy food, or they're always too tired to cook for themselves, or when they finish work, the only things that are open to them to get some food after work are fast food, or kind of kebab houses, for example. So we try and educate both businesses and individuals on the benefits of health and well-being for hospitality. Because from the way I look at it, is hospitality, the thing that hospitality sells is not food and drink. It's something we use, but the product that hospitality sells is customer experience. People come to your bar, to your restaurant, to your hotel because of how they feel when they're there. You go, you'll know that, like, your favorite restaurant is your favorite restaurant because when you go there, you feel great. The atmosphere is fantastic. The food is good. The staff are friendly. You like going there. When you go there, you have a good feeling. And it might not be the best tasting. You would rather go there than go to a restaurant that has the best tasting food, but the staff are rude. The service is, the atmosphere is cold and unfriendly. So I always say that, people come back to your business because of how you make them feel. They might come to your business once because of a review they read, or a reputation, or something that someone said to them. But they'll come back to your business because of how you make them feel. And those repeat customers are the customers that you want for your business. So because of that, and because hospitality is one of the most people-focused or people-facing businesses out there, and when you walk into a bar or a restaurant, you generally will meet 2 or 3 staff members whilst you're in there. So it's incredibly people facing. So if your staff are tired, miserable, struggling with burnout, managers bullying them, maybe they're on a come down from last night's cocaine after a busy shift, you're not going to be able the staff are not going to be able to give great customer service time and time again. So it's going to impact the business. It's going to impact the staff. It just impacts everything. and particularly after COVID. The hospitality industry has been through more hardship than almost any other industry in the past 4 or 5 years. In a lot of countries, hospitality was blamed for the spread of COVID. It's like, right, we need to shut down any sort of hospitality venue because that's where COVID is spread. It's hospitality's fault. And then in most places, there was very little support for the hospitality industry to get through it. You saw in the UK, landlords were protected. So the government went, well, we need to make sure that landlords keep getting their rent from the restaurants, but we won't protect the restaurants. We won't give the restaurants a break in paying rent. We'll give the rent money to the land. We'll give them and say, oh, you've got an extra 3 months to pay your rent. So they protected the landlords rather than the businesses. And you've already got some of the most vulnerable staff of any industry in the world because they are so poorly paid. Quite often they'll be paid hourly, no contracts, very little employee protections. So Healthy Hospo is really trying to change that narrative. So we do a lot of training. We have built a digital classroom, which I'm very proud of. So we put all of our training material online for people to be able to access, because it's a difficult industry to do training in, because you can't shut the restaurant in the middle of service to go, oh, sorry, we're going to do an hour's training on sleep for our staff now. So you have to kind of find creative and innovative solutions to be able to get the training material to staff. So we built this digital classroom to allow people to kind of access that information on their own terms and in their own time. And then just travel around talking about the importance of sleep, human connection, mental health, financial health, from a very kind of proactive point of view. So rather than when we talk about mental health, rather than going like, well, you need to go and see a therapist or a counselor and you should have a mental health first aider, it's like, well, let's also talk about making sure you get enough sleep. Because sleep is one of the key factors that will influence emotional instability and influence your mental health. Let's make sure that you're eating correctly, because there is a connection between your gut biome and your brain. So what you eat does impact your mood and your mental health. Let's make sure that your social connections are strong, because loneliness is one of the biggest killers in men over 35. Let's make sure that you're doing exercise, which is one area where hospitality actually does really well, because it is a physical job. You're not sitting in a chair all day long. You're on your feet, you're being active. So that's an area where hospitality performs really, really well. And let's talk about financial health, because it is an industry that doesn't pay very well. And money is a cause of constant stress when you don't have enough of it. So we provide training and information and education on all of those topics and a lot more.
I have a sense that also what you're doing with the Healthy Hospo, you brought it also to Avallen in a way, because this idea of sharing knowledge all the time as much as possible. I've seen it also in Avallen, where you do I think it's positively charged webinars.
Yes,
too.
correct, yes.
So how important is that idea of spreading into the network?
I think it's hugely important, because if neither of my businesses are about making as much money as physically possible. Both businesses are about trying to make the world a better place, whether it's with Healthy Hospo trying to improve the working conditions and health of hospitality workers around the world, or it's Avallen, which is trying to combat climate change and catastrophic biodiversity loss, and also protect my little pooch, Rosa.
Yes.
There's a really a good saying I like, that there's no point being the last tree standing in the forest. If with Healthy Hospo and Avallen, I was like, right, we're going to keep all the information for ourselves. It's, what's the point in that? If Avallen's mission is to be the most sustainable spirits brand in the world, and we're really passionate about combating climate change and turning around biodiversity loss, we can't do it on our own. We need to bring everyone along on that journey. We need to be a brand that inspires others to take good action, because they say it takes a village to raise a child, but to turn climate change around and biodiversity loss, it's going to take the entire world. Everyone is going to have to make an impact at some point. And so sharing all of the knowledge that we've learned is absolutely fundamental to what we do with both businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's close a little bit, even if there is so much to talk about. But so what is the future for both your business or for you? What do you see in the next years?
That's a good question, because obviously we're almost in December, so there's a lot of work and thinking going on about that at the moment. 2023 has been a very challenging year for a number of reasons for both businesses, but 2024 I'm very positive for. I think for Avallen, we managed to grow this year despite some very difficult trading conditions, particularly in the UK, which is our biggest market. But next year we have some new countries coming on board with Avallen. We have a very clear strategy next year. So we're going to bring back the Appletini. So all of our work is going to get people to put down their Aperol spritz and to pick up an Appletini, a very simple drink with Avallen, Calvados, apple juice, a little bit of lemon, and a little bit of sugar. Super refreshing, super delicious. So we're really going to push that around the world and see if we can get people drinking climate positive Appletinis. We are launching in Italy in January, so you'll be able to get some Avallen in Italy. And then with Healthy Hospo, we are currently working on a very big project right now, which we will launch in January. It's with one of the world's biggest FMCG companies, but it's a really, really exciting project because it's something we haven't done with Healthy Hospo before, and it tackles a problem that is endemic to the hospitality industry. So we are trying to provide education to tackle the gender inequality within professional kitchens. So you've got 51% of culinary students are female, yet only 20% of chefs are female, and they generally employ or are found in the lowest levels of the chef ranks, and only 7% of head chefs are female. So there's obviously a big problem within the industry, because there's a lot of women that want to come into the industry because they're becoming students, but then at some point along their journey they're going like, no, this is not where I want to be. So we need to kind of start to change the culture within professional kitchens to make them friendlier and safer spaces for women to be. So that's a really exciting project that we're working on, which we're going to launch in January. We're doing some more evolution to our digital classroom, so we will be launching the classroom as an app, so you'll be able to download it onto your phone, whether you've got an iPhone or an Android phone, which I think will be really transformative for our business, and hopefully transformative for the industry as well, so people can have this app on their phone which will help them no matter where they are. So 2024 I'm feeling very positive about.
Wow, I will be following all of them. Very interesting. And we will be sharing also the notes in the show notes, all the links, so that people can check out. One last question. What can people do in the next hour to already make a change? I heard you giving a suggestion about this, so I'm looking also for a specific answer, but I let you brainstorm and give me.
Aside from drinking or buying some Avallen,
I heard you in a conference talking about banking, and I thought it was.
Oh yes, my banking. So banking is a really interesting one, because a lot of people don't really think about the interest or the impact of their money when it's in their bank. So with Avallen and myself personally, I bank with Triodos. which is the world's most sustainable bank, or the world's first sustainable bank from the Netherlands, now also in the UK. Well, let's go back and start with how banking works. So the way the banking system works is we have a system called fractional reserve banking, which means that your bank is only legally required to hold 10% of your deposit. So if you deposit £1,000 into the bank is only legally required to keep 100, sorry, let's do it in euros, 100 euros within the bank. The other 900 euros of yours, they will loan out to businesses and charge an interest rate. And it's one of the ways that banks make money. Now, when they loan that money out, depending on who your bank is, sometimes they will loan it to oil companies, for example, for extraction and exploration of oil companies. Sometimes they'll loan it to arms manufacturers, which is obviously very relevant now given what's going on in Ukraine and Palestine. And so if you want your money to be used for good instead of evil, and I think most of us would like that, there's a really amazing app that people can go on straight away, or not an app, it's a website called bank.green. And no matter which country you live in the world, you can find your country, you can find your bank, and you can see what your bank is doing with your money, where it's investing your money. And then the platform will also give you suggestions for sustainable banks within your country. So you can move your money to a bank that uses your money for the benefit of the environment and society rather than to make it worse.
Wonderful. I did it. So I'm pretty happy that
fantastic.
you gave me that suggestion.
I've had a few people now that said they've changed their bank because of training sessions that we've done. And again, it goes back to that kind of sharing of knowledge. If I change my bank, I have a small impact, but if I can then inspire 10 other people to change their banks, then all of a sudden 11 people have changed their bank. We've had a 10-fold increase in positivity. Yeah. And if those 10 people can do the same, all of a sudden it's over 100 people have changed their bank.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you very much, Tim. We have to close, but it has been a real pleasure and also an honor really to talk with you. I'm gonna follow you for more suggestions because it's beautiful how you study things and then share all the knowledge. So I really love it. Thank you so much.
Please keep in touch.
Yeah, I will. Thank you everybody for being here with us and following this episode. If you like it, please follow us in YouTube. And thank you, Tim, and have a nice day.